everyone. Thank you. That was so sweet. I always get red when people talk about me in front of me, so I might be a little red to start off. Thank you so much. I feel so much joy in my heart this morning just because there's so many people who I love in this room. I also feel a lot of joy this morning because I got in a cab, my Lyft here, and the guy who was driving was from Venezuela, and out of nowhere, he just asked me if I spoke Spanish, which has been asked of me in my 8 years or 9 years in Pittsburgh, like maybe 0.5 times. So I was really excited to be able to speak to him in Spanish. He's been here 2 weeks, and I had made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to talk about culture because I talk a lot about culture and I want to kind of do something different. But then I was in the car and I'm like, I can't not talk about culture. Like, I have to give it up. And he was really sharing. He's been here 2 weeks. His girlfriend's pregnant. And he's just like, there's no Latinos. Who do I talk to? Where do I go? I don't know. And I was like, yeah, I don't really know either. I hear you. I've been figuring that out for like 9 years. But it was a reminder of where we like base ourselves in, really like they have a way of showing up in the least expected places. So with that, I also want to say that my name is Tara, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I moved here 9 years ago. I have to give a shout out to Brooklyn because the thing is that when you're from Brooklyn, you constantly have to talk about the fact that you're from Brooklyn. It's like what it is, you know, and that's a part of being an arrogant New Yorker, which I am. But ever since moving to Pittsburgh, there's been a lot of humbling experiences in terms of how we communicate and the things that we bring to the table with us, and just being self-aware of those things when we are interacting with each other. So shout out to culture and all those lessons that you learn through that. The other thing that I kind of want to acknowledge too is the topic of taboo. It's a very interesting topic to be given to me right now. I'm sort of going through this process of undoing learning around what is good and what is bad, right? Like, we're always told, oh, you're a good girl, or you're being bad, or this is good and this is bad. And really kind of reflecting on the fact that there really isn't good and bad. There's just experiences and there's stories, and they hit us in different ways depending on our experiences and where we come from. And so the idea of taboo is an interesting idea because it is totally subjective. And so the way that I'm sort of approaching it this week in my speech is to really kind of give myself a challenge to talk about things that I probably wouldn't talk about otherwise. I sort of have a set speech that I usually give in front of people, so I'm scrapping that to the wind. And I'm going to be putting myself into uncomfortable positions and asking questions of you guys that are difficult to ask. And mainly it's because it starts with me, right? It starts with yourself. And so I'm really trying to be as vulnerable and open with that. So with that said, I do want to also just take a moment to kind of censor everybody because it's been a really crazy year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, but particularly this week, especially with the rain, and it's Friday, it's the end of March, it's spring. I just want everyone to kind of get centered and grounded. So we're going to start off with everybody just closing their eyes for a moment. And just kind of sit up straight, put both your feet on the floor, really feel your feet on the floor, feel 4 corners on the floor, and I want you to take a deep breath in and just let it out, sigh it out, whatever you gotta do. Take another really deep breath in, get it down to your toes, and let it out. Think about something that made you smile this week, and then smile, and you guys can open your eyes. So. Hi. So I'm going to start with, in my official beginning of my official speech, I want to talk about being an entrepreneur. It's sort of timely with the fact that it's Inclusive Innovation Week. So my decision around becoming an entrepreneur, and I don't even know if I consider myself an entrepreneur, but I am my own boss. You know, I do control my own schedule. So I'm going to say that that's my definition of entrepreneurship. And my decision to go out on my own really had to do more than anything with the fact that I wanted to have a flexible schedule. I didn't want to work at a desk. I'm a social worker by training, and I chose being a social worker because I really like the nature of the work and being able to go out every single day and interact with different kinds of people and see different kinds of things. And really, you know, interacting in the world in a very authentic way. And after a couple of years in the profession, what I found was a lot of it was sitting at a desk and having this schedule. And I'm not very good with that. I'm a very creative person. And so my desire to go out on my own really came from just wanting to control my own schedule and being a creative person and just wanting to be able to express that in different ways whenever, you know, it worked for me or how it felt for me, how it fell for me. So coming to that realization in and of itself is its own process, and you definitely should never go out on your own if you don't necessarily have some kind of a cushion, which is also very cliche advice to give, but very good advice. There's a reason why it's a cliche. So it's been an interesting experience. I mean, I think I quit my full-time job probably almost 2 years ago, or maybe a little over 2 years ago, and it's been an interesting experience. I think the struggle as a woman really comes from the fact that you are not seen as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs, especially in this day and age, really, you're thinking of startups, right? And VC, I guess that's venture capitalists, right? There's this like whole lingo that goes along with being an entrepreneur that you're supposed to like automatically know the second that you do your own thing. Well, I'm not into technology, and I don't know about venture capitalists, but I do know that you do need capital, and that's always the number one thing about becoming an entrepreneur. And so I started this thing called Café con Leche 3 years ago, and yeah, it's brought a lot of joy to me, and it's brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, and it really was about building relationships and creating spaces and sparking a conversation around Latinos in Pittsburgh. It was something that I needed to see, and I think a lot of people felt that way because it was very well received. And we've been around for about 3 years. Actually, our 3-year anniversary of our first event is next week. It's April 6th. So that has been a great thing, and there's a TED Talk out there where I talk about the story of Café con Leche, so if you want to see the backstory, I highly recommend looking up my TEDx talk, but so I'm not going to get into those details. I really want to talk about where I'm at right now. Where I'm at right now is Café con Leche is 3 years old, and I've grown and I've changed, and I came to a place where if I was going to continue doing Café con Leche, I knew that I needed to take a step up. I knew that it needed to grow with me, right? Like, I'm changing, I'm growing, so this thing that I've created conceivably needs to grow with me. So what is the logical way, in my mind, the logical way to grow Café con Leche was to open a cafe, to open up a physical space. It made sense for all of the reasons that you can imagine. We could house all of our programming, we would be able to sell food, we would be able to service the community, and it would be a source of revenue. Now, I actually really went pretty far ahead in planning that. Like, I found a space, I started getting my team together, I started, exploring financial options, and it just didn't fall right for me. It's just something in my instinct was just not working. And I took some time to reflect. I went to Puerto Rico for Christmas. I would go every year. I was with my family, and I was just talking about it, and it didn't fall right to me. And so I made the really difficult decision to actually walk away from opening up the cafe because, again, I didn't have enough capital, so I was gonna have to take out a huge amount of loans. And the ratio of the debt to losing my freedom, which was the number one reason why I had chosen to become an entrepreneur, it just wasn't worth it. It was my freedom and my ability to control my schedule and to be creative and to evolve was more important than my dream of growing Café con Leche into something else. So I made the difficult decision now probably about 4 months ago to not grow Café con Leche. And I've sort of been in this process of like, okay, well, if I'm not going to grow it, like, what am I going to do with it? Or what am I going to do with myself, more importantly? Because the two are not mutually exclusive. This was a brand that I created based off of experiences and ideas and situations that I had been in, but it wasn't necessarily the person who I am. It wasn't the end all and be all, right? Like, I'm not done. I got much more to do. I got a second act, probably like 10 more acts in me. So, right. So at this point, I actually took a page from Destiny's Child. I gotta give it up. I got to give J-Lo a shout out too. I'll do that after Destiny's Child. So I had to take a page out of Destiny's Child playbook because here's the thing: when Destiny's Child broke up, I remember watching an interview with them, and Beyonce very, very clearly said, we're at the top of our game, right? No one is like really hating us. Like, we even driven this band into the ground. No one showed up drunk somewhere and like couldn't sing. They were still really at the top of their game, and they were the best that they could be. So what a way to go out. You're ready to move on. When you're ready to move on, because when it's done, it's done. And if you keep trying to like make it work and you've like moved on, you're gonna end up ruining the very thing that people love. And it's better to let it go and let it be this amazing memory and this thing that lives on forever than to have it be a joke for the rest of the life, for the rest of people's memories. So I made the difficult decision to let Café con Leche sort of sunset into the ethos, if you will. And at this point, I do want to give a shout out to J-Lo, who is my other inspiration for becoming an entrepreneur, because here's the thing about J-Lo. She will always reinvent herself. She has like 15 talents, and she all does them like really, pretty well. Maybe not like all, she hasn't, well, no, she's a master dancer for sure. But she's a dancer, but she does so many other things, and she's like unapologetic about it, and she just keeps it going, and she's like laughing all the way to the bank. So I like love that, it's like, here's this woman who's just like unapologetically like, I can do 15 things and make you a drink, and I'm gonna date all the most handsome, rich, famous men in the world, probably marry them, have twins with one of them, and keep it moving. What? Oh, and then I'm gonna date a 25-year-old. So, I mean, like, what an inspiration for women who just need to be who they are and allow themselves to fall in love and to be open and to be vulnerable and to fully embrace every single aspect of who they are when it feels right. And that's following your instincts. So that's my ode to J-Lo, a fellow New Yorker, New Yorican. So, so with that said, as I said, I've kind of made the difficult decision to sort of let Café con Leche ride off into the sunset. I'm not going to kill it because we love it. But I think that there is a lot of lessons here for everyone, including myself, around when is it time to let a good thing go. And that's only a decision that you can make when you're ready to make it. But we're all going to come to that crossroads several times, and you have to know that it's okay to let it go. But then the question always becomes, what's the next act, right? So my next act is I'm going to be launching my own consulting company. It's called TST Productions. And I want to talk a little bit about the things that I'm going to be focusing on within the consulting project or within my consulting company, because for me, these are the living values that I've taken from, these are the lessons that I've learned from Café con Leche, these are the lessons that I've learned from being a social worker, an organizer, a daughter, a hostess, a cook, and these are the lessons that I always find to be 100% true. So the first piece that I want to focus on is communication. Communication, we're humans, we relate to each other, right? There's nothing, you can't get anything done if you can't communicate with somebody. And communication can happen in so many different forms. These are some forms that I'll get into in a minute, but communication happens with your body, it happens with the tone of your voice, it happens with how the space is set up when you're talking to somebody, right? Like if you want to make someone super uncomfortable, you meet them somewhere that makes them super uncomfortable. If there's like, you just really, any type of context that you are with someone else in is a form of communication. So you have to be really mindful about that when you're setting up scenarios to be able to talk to somebody. So in this case, when it comes to communications, what I find a lot with nonprofits, small businesses, community-minded businesses too, but we have this thing around, stigmatization of social services. And what if we were actually able to think about social services from the perspective of a marketing plan, right? Marketing plans take the very best attributes of any one person, and they build entire plans on how to service them, right? They figure out how much money you make, they figure out how big your family is, they figure out how much time you spend with your family, where do you shop, how do you hang out, what do you like to eat, and they make everything possible so that you're gonna wanna buy their product, buy their service, or do whatever. So what if, and then social services is so different, right? Social services is more like, okay, we say that it's strengths-based, but like, are there any social workers in the room? Just show of hand, any other social workers? Any community workers? Let's go there. Right, okay, so y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Like, you can't, you are kind of doing, there is like this strengths-based thought, but the reality is that you're really looking at the deficiencies of the person and you're trying to solve the problems of this person. So along with that comes stigmatization, negative, it's just like a lot of negativity, which then has the snowball effect of people don't necessarily want to get services or they don't trust certain things. So I want to just sort of invite the idea of like, how do we actually make social services culturally relevant to people in their hearts, not just something that they need because they're suffering. And that's really where the communications piece comes in. And so thinking about the marketing of different social services and how we actually build up that marketing to appeal to the clients that people are trying to reach, right? Like digital media, we're increasingly becoming more digital. I know that that's not the only way that we communicate, and there are people who are off the digital period, but going forward, that's going to change more and more. And eventually, we're all going to be senior citizens, and guess where we're going to be? In the digital atmosphere. So at some point, social services really do have to catch up to thinking about how are they actually utilizing legitimate, like sexy kind of digital media to get their messaging across to the clients that they're going to be serving. If not now, definitely in the future. The same thing with writing, blogs, people, and videos, I should also say, because videos are I don't think writing will ever go away, hopefully not, but videos are also really huge. But these are ways to be able to convey different pieces of information. You're really able to speak to people's hearts and interests through blog posts and articles, and really be able to give them the important information that they may need for quality of life reasons. Word of mouth is really the most authentic way to communicate, and this is what I found even with Café con Leche. Like, we did a lot of our stuff all on Facebook, but the number one way that people found out of us was word of mouth. So really, that's about having authentic relationships and making sure that all of these pieces that you're doing is coming back to, again, speaking to the heart of people. All of these things will help you get money, and I'll explain in a minute. The other piece of the TST Productions is events. And this is very much Café con Leche, right? We all need fun in our lives. Like, we come here, we're talking about these like really serious issues, and here I am talking about like how sad it is that social services doesn't really necessarily meet the people where they're at. Okay, we need to have that conversation, and then afterwards, we all need to get together and have some fun. And I'm always like surprised at how people are like, oh, so it's just a party? Yeah, it's just a party. Like, really? Yes, it is that simple. Like, go to a party and have a drink and break bread with a friend or new friends or laugh. Like, just let it go, and we need that to be healthy. We need that for healthy communication. We need that for our souls. We need that. So embrace it. Like, don't, make fun of it. Embrace it. And it goes back to these things, relating to each other, building relationships. And again, how do you get money? You get money because you have a relationship with someone and you were able to communicate effectively what your mission was, right? Like, foundations don't give people money if they don't understand what they're doing or if you don't have a relationship with them. People don't donate to your organization if they don't know you or like what you're doing. And you can only do that if you are having good communication strategies and you have those relationships. And the other piece to this is organizing. So the obvious piece is like community organizing. I've been a community organizer for years. Shout out to other community organizers in the room and in this world. We are some of the unsung heroes, but it is definitely about organizing. And organizing is a bunch of different things. So it's definitely outreach, it's definitely community, but it's also logistics, right? Like, make sure that the logistics of whatever you're putting together work, right? People should be able to have a seamless transition from point A to point B. People should be able to walk into a space and feel received and feel welcomed and feel comfortable. No microaggressions, no traumatizing. People are traumatized in this world. Like, we are all traumatized. So you really need to think about the types of spaces that you're creating, the logistics of that space, and how people are feeling when they're coming in, because otherwise all of the other things will not work. And again, that goes back to relationships, which ultimately, of course, will give you money. So we all want money. Because it's true. Again, relationships are the currency of life. You're not going to get anything done if you don't have a relationship, which is why the marketing piece is important. That's why the events piece is important. And that's why the organizing piece. If you have all of those things in place, you will be able to get what you need to be able to get what you need to get it done. So on that note, I do have a couple of calls of action. My first call to action is really something that Iyanla Vanzant is known for saying, and that is, do your work, right? You gotta do your work. What does that mean? Well, we're talking a lot about equity, inclusiveness, and equality, and diversity these days, and there's a lot of really great initiatives out there getting it. However, of all of the organizations, initiatives, people, groups, how many of them actually have anti-racist statements? How many of them have anti-sexism statements? How many of them provide anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-oppression training to them? How many of those individuals, if they get that training or just on their own, are taking the time to learn about the different oppressive systems that keep people where they're at? We can create all we want initiative-wise, business-wise, community-wise, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the individuals and then to those relationships. So you gotta start with yourself, you gotta start at home, and you gotta start with your family. it's interesting to me that Trump was elected after we did like 8-10 years of such hard organizing. Clearly, there's some disconnect beyond just the Electoral College that is not getting through. So I really encourage you guys to have difficult conversations. And it isn't just the difficult conversation of like talking to a racist family member and trying to convince them not to be racist, but like really dialogue with them and find out what is it that they feel? Where are they coming from? Sit with that uncomfortableness, understand how that uncomfortableness, why does that make you uncomfortable? So how can you get beyond that uncomfortableness and have like a real dialogue? We really need to work through that because right now we're not talking to each other. And it's because we're not comfortable with sitting with being uncomfortable. So I'm gonna leave that call to action, that small little call to action. And that kind of bleeds into my second call to action, which is really paying attention to your relationships, especially in this world. I mean, it's not just the United States. Britain is in chaos. Venezuela, is in this right now. It's not in the news, but Venezuela is imploding right now, and you should all look it up. But everywhere you look, so many countries are in conflict and there's so much turmoil. There's clearly a change happening in our world. There's clearly a power shift. There's a struggle going on and it's very real. And at this point, it's so important that we pay attention to our relationships because that's what's gonna get us through to the other side. So make sure you're taking care of yourself and those around you. Then my last call to action is around this thing, adoration versus affirmation. And this is how you can kind of support small entrepreneurs, small businesses, entrepreneurs of all different types. So adoration is really going up to someone and being like, you're so great, I love what you do, oh my God. And that's really great, right? We all love being told that what we're doing is good and that it resonates with people. There is a value in that. The affirmation piece is taking that a step further and hiring that entrepreneur. So my call to action is to visit my website, recommend me for a job, or somebody else, and I mean that, I say it as a joke, but I really mean that. Recommend people that you know that have small businesses for jobs. And that's all I gotta say, so thank you. Are we doing Q&A?